is just I do a couple of landscape things, and so on this graphic right now, don't really worry about the blue and red blocks on it for the troops. Just note the depiction of Brock Field. The white area right here, which is where we are right now. The white area here, which would be in that direction, and then the area on the other side of Brotherton Road, that area there, with this symbol on it. This is one of 3 Brock farmsteads in the immediate area of the battle. The actual farmstead, the cluster of buildings of this farmstead was in the trees right over here. The Brocks had, their predecessors, we actually sadly do not know a great deal about the Brocks. Even a Brock descendant who herself is a historian and who has researched the Brocks extensively, cannot solve the potential relationship between these 3 Brocks. We cannot even put which Brock was in exactly which one of these farmsteads. The Brocks are here on the 1860 census, but exactly which one of those Brock census entries goes with which one of these 3 Brock houses can't be done. But we don't know how long they had actually been here. So whether they had started clearing this farm or someone else had, that's not known for certain. But there is a farm here, and basically what we have today for Brock Field is part of this field, the one that we're in right now. Today, this Brock Field ends, some of you all can see on this map, the blue line for this wet weather drainage runs right along there. Okay, that drainage is in those trees over there. But there was more Brock Field on the other side of that drainage. So the field needs to continue in that direction another 100 yards or so. Some of you all who may know the battlefield in a little more detail know that if you go down the trail from Brotherton Road there, you'll come to the guns for Scott's Tennessee Battery. Those guns were at the edge of the field. So much larger field in that direction. This field, the south end of it, is about correct. It joins this strip of woods. There's some drainages in there which could not be farmed, and there were still trees on it. But what is really missing is this larger section of Brock Field that the field resumed after that strip of woods and extended much further to the west. Now, on the north side of the road, there are felled trees at the time. And in fact, the Confederates in this fighting, will say that they pushed the Yankees back into their breastworks. But on September the 19th, the Federals have not yet really begun to build their log barricades yet. But what the Confederates do is they push Federal troops back into this zone where there are trees that have been cut. And there are descriptions of stumps, piles of wood and brush, and this area was probably being logged. because just a mile down Brotherton Road in that direction is Jay's Steam Sawmill. And the Brocks had probably sold the saw logs off of this piece of property in an effort to clear it, to make their farm larger, and the logs were being hauled over and being sawed up at Jay's Mill. So much more sense of open ground here in 1863 than we have today. So, you want to bring Palmer on?
So when Palmer gets the communication from Thomas, he starts to come north on the Lafayette Road, and as I said, they're looking for the Confederate flank. Thomas, by the time Palmer comes north, Thomas's two divisions are already engaged to the north of us, and there have been the Federals have moved forward and struck a Confederate flank and routed a Confederate brigade. In response, St. John Liddell's infantry division, or if you're from England, St. John Liddell's infantry division, had moved and struck Absalom Barrett's flank. So Thomas or Palmer, Thomas is hoping to use Palmer, I think, to find that flank. This theme will be throughout the day. We'll see it repeat all the way down the line. So, but just as Palmer deploys along the Lafayette Road, a typical advance would be 2 brigades forward and 1 brigade in reserve. Each brigade would be deployed in by what now is the standard Army of the Cumberland tactical formation, first adopted by General Buell for the Army of the Ohio in April of 1862, which is, if you have 4 regiments in your brigade, 2 regiments are in front, in line, and 2 regiments are trailing 50 to 150 yards in either something called column of division, 2 companies by 5 companies, or also in line. So it's a square formation, 2 regiments forward, 2 regiments back. Those brigades with larger numbers of regiments, some brigades have 5 regiments, will adopt a variation of that. You'll see in some cases 3 regiments forward, 2 regiments back, or even in some cases 2 regiments, and 1 regiment. So they have 3 lines. It just depends on tactical circumstances. In this case, Palmer is advancing with his 3 brigades, essentially 2 forward and 1 in echelon. And he gets a communication from General Rosecrans. And Rosecrans says, because he's already learned about the flanking of General Baird, Rosecrans warns Palmer that he's going to advance without support on his southern flank. So if I'm General Palmer and I'm moving this way, somewhere down there, I don't have friendly troops. There's a gap between Palmer's division and the rest of the 21st Corps, which Palmer is well aware of. He just marched north to open that gap. And then General Rosecrans suggests that he should advance in echelon. So instead of 2 brigades, a brigade here and a brigade here and 1 in reserve, he's actually going to stair-step them. 1, 2, 3. So they're going to form this sort of staggered line, advancing generally east towards this field, Brock Field, and they'll come through the woods here, and that gives us William B. Hazen's brigade on the north, and then General Croft, and ultimately General Gross.
David, where did they front? On the Lafayette Road? Is that where they fronted?
Yes.
And Palmer, in his report, says, about noon, I received orders to move my whole division to the assistance of our troops then engaged. I moved at once and met Gross's brigade returning. So Gross has not gotten back to Palmer's position north of Lee and Gordon's Mill, before Palmer is ordered to come up this way. And so literally, as Palmer starts moving this way, he's coming north with Hazen, with Cruft in the lead, and then Hazen, and they meet Gross going south. Cruft and Hazen then will pass Gross. Gross will then fall in behind Hazen and march to the north, and they will then form up out on the Lafayette Road in that 2 up and 1 back formation. And he goes on to say, after marching quickly for perhaps a mile and a half, guided by the sounds of the firing, and forming lines to the right of the road, ordered Hazen, who was on the left. Hazen actually has to march past Cruft to get into position, to march in the direction of the firing. Cruft to keep well closed up to him on his right, and Gross in reserve, reinforcing the right, and engage as soon as possible. At this moment, I received a note from the general commanding the army, which led to a slight, but what turned out to be most advantageous change of formation. He suggested an advance in echelon by brigade, refusing the right, keeping well closed up on Thomas. This suggestion was adopted. The brigades, at about 100 pace intervals, pushed forward and engaged the enemy almost simultaneously.
So as Hazen comes onto the battlefield, he's now essentially leading the division, and then the other 2 brigades are off to the southwest at 100 pace intervals. Simultaneously, Benjamin Franklin Cheatham's division of 5 Tennessee brigades, 4 Tennessee brigades and 1 mixed brigade, is advancing. Cheatham has crossed West Chickamauga Creek. Cheatham is 1/2 of Leonidas Polk's corps, and they were the southernmost corps, second southernmost corps on the line of September 18th. They were opposite Lee and Gordon's Mill. And on the morning of September 19th, Cheatham's division crosses at I'm sorry, I completely blanked on the Ford name. Dalton. Crossed there and moves up behind what it turns out to be this large mass of Confederate troops off to our south. One of the effects of Thomas's advance is that it disrupts Braxton Bragg's plan. Bragg has massed the corps of Simon B. Buckner and now the 1st Corps Army of Northern Virginia, currently commanded by John Bell Hood, because Longstreet isn't here yet. So he's massed those 2 corps.
And Walker.
And behind them, Walker's Reserve Corps, or at least part of Walker's Reserve Corps. There are still elements crossing the creek, and some of them are as far away as Rome. Somewhere on the order of 25,000 troops deployed to the south of us, facing west, ready to launch what Bragg expects to be this big turning movement to push west and then turn south and outflank the Union Army, which he still believes, he believes that their right flank, their northern flank, ends around Lee and Gordon's Mill. That belief changes with the fighting we've described, with Brannan and Baird going into the woods. The combat that develops around Jay's Mill and Jay's Field and Winfrey Field, and is beginning to spread south. So in response, Cheatham's division marches north, deploys in line with 3 brigades in line, or in the front line, and 2 brigades in reserve. Now the Confederates, by and large, have not read Casey's manual, or if they have, they've decided not to adopt it.
At this point.
They are still using what is essentially the tactical formations, brigade formations described in Scott's tactics of the 1830. So their regiments are in a single line. So if you have, for instance, two 1,200-man brigades, one Federal brigade and one Confederate brigade, each of 4 regiments, say, each of 300 men, the Confederate line will be 4 regiments long. All 1,200 men will be in a battle line. The Union line will only have 2 regiments, 600 men, in their front line. So in theory, they have half the frontage of a Confederate infantry brigade moving in line. The Federals have more reserves. They have better control over their reserves. That's one of the benefits of Casey's manual, but they have a shorter front. And so unless they have troops on their right and left, their flanks are more vulnerable. Cheatham's division ends up entering the battle really in almost a mile-long frontage, an arc, with John K. Jackson's brigade engaged primarily in the timber north of us. I forget the brigade order.
Jackson, Smith,
Smith,
right across the front.
Yeah, and then Smith's brigade coming into this fight, and then finally Wright's brigade moving there. And the other 2 brigades, Vaughn and Maney, are Maney and Vaughn. They're in
Maney and Straw.
Sorry. They're behind. So they're going to enter the field sort of on a wide arc, and as a matter of fact, when Jackson's brigade engages, it engages a little further east. Smith's brigade comes forward and runs into Hazen, and then Wright's brigade is actually going to move south a much greater distance. They don't connect, or they don't strike the Union line all at the same time, because the Union line is stair-stepped, is staggered, and so Wright is actually going to keep moving west and engage. So what we have by the time they're fully engaged is a semicircular battle line that stretches from almost up there at the Alexander's Bridge Road, down across this line to that far field, and then almost out to the Lafayette Road, just a couple of hundred yards short of the Lafayette Road.
And Palmer's going to react, as we'll see, and that's how we're going to wind up with Palmer folded back, with Hazen facing in the direction that the majority of you all are right now initially, and then Cruft, who initially was to Hazen's right rear, facing east. Cruft is going to fold back to be facing south, and then Gross the same way, initially facing east, but as the fighting develops, wind up folding back and facing to the south, and the Confederates kind of wrapping around that. So the Confederates, however, still overlapping the flank of Palmer's divisions.
How did Cheatham know where to stop? I mean, he's down by Dalton Ford, and he says
he goes up. He's marching up, and he's supposed to go in and support Walker. And Walker had, and in particular Liddell's division, is the Walker that is talked about, that Cheatham is Cheatham doesn't know that it's just Liddell's division. He's told to go support Walker, but what Walker is at that moment is just Liddell's division. And so Cheatham marches up from the south, much as Liddell had marched up from the south. And so Cheatham comes in on what had been the rear of Liddell's division, but by that moment, Cruxton has forced Liddell off to the east. And then Cruxton makes contact with Jackson's brigade, and so Cheatham now thinks that he is in Walker's sector. However, it's actually going to be basically to the south of where Walker had been engaged. So And for Cheatham, the indication that that he's at least initially behind Walker is going to be the assistant surgeons and the litter bearers, the infirmary corps, treating and carrying wounded of Liddell's division to the rear, wounded of Liddell's division going in the opposite direction of how they had advanced, headed back to where the field hospitals may be. Even the movement of Liddell's people try to move some of the guns of the 4th Indiana Battery and Van Pelt's Battery to the south as well. And there are captured Union soldiers who are being shepherded to the rear. So Cheatham says, okay, I'm behind Walker, and so I must be in the right place. However, he doesn't realize how how Cruxton's attack of Liddell's left has reoriented things at that moment. And because he's coming in behind Walker, they don't. They're really late in putting out skirmishers because they think they're behind Walker's divisions.
When Jackson's brigade engages up here, he engages primarily. Well, first he engages elements of Baird's division, but then he'll get pushed back by August Willard's brigade.
Yeah, eventually, right?
Yeah, and that will Jackson's Confederates will actually end up being replaced by Maney's brigade. That fighting we won't talk about because it's not on our header. It's not on the topic list. But that all develops just to the north of us across the road and in that timber, what should be an open field.
So Palmer got here first.
Yes, before Johnson. Yes.
Yeah, before Cheatham.
Yes. Well, actually, Palmer and Cheatham's arrival, more specifically, Hazen and Cheatham's arrival here at Brock Field, right where we are now, is basically simultaneous. Cheatham is advancing, and Hazen is advancing, and Hazen's going to come in from that direction. Preston Smith's brigade of Cheatham's division from that direction, and they're essentially going to encounter one another here in this field. Hazen does arrive, excuse me, a little bit early, and that's how he gets out here in the field. But then it's going to be pushed back. So.
Yeah, there's accounts out of Hazen's brigade have Hazen arriving. He has skirmishers deployed. And they run into Confederate skirmishers, and so Hazen starts to push. The skirmish line goes forward. Company B of the 124th Ohio actually talks about crossing through another thin belt of trees, which is possibly that belt down there, but maybe not. There might still be a skirt of timber somewhere in the field because it's they can see through that belt of trees pretty easily. But they're still on the skirmish line out forward when both battle lines appear and start engaging each other at about a range of roughly 200 to 300 yards. And so the 124th Ohio is a relatively green regiment, raised in 1862. This is their first real taste of combat. Company B as skirmishers are for a time pinned down between the lines. They can't get up because both sides are exchanging fire over them. Eventually they'll manage to fall back and reform with the rest of the regiment, rest of the brigade. But when Hazen gets out here, and you see his line of monuments here, what will develop is a static stand-up firefight. The regiments trade fire. Smith's regiments don't come forward. They don't charge. They also halt and engage. And then both sides will start to burn up their ammunition. Because Hazen's flank is secured, he doesn't have to worry about deploying his reserve regiments. He's able to use those reserve regiments to change positions, come forward to the front line, and they can engage while the two former frontline regiments fall back and resupply. But that firefight will last. It's hard to put an exact time on these things, but somewhere between an hour and an hour and a half, I think, is how long they exchange fire. Now, each side has roughly 100 rounds per man. Both have been supplied with extra ammunition because they know they're going into a fight. Typically, you carry 60 rounds per man into battle, 40 in your cartridge box and 20 in your haversack. They've been issued, Hazen's men have been issued an extra 40. And though I don't have any accounts specifically from Smith's brigade that I recall that talk about getting extra ammo at the time, other brigades do get reissues or new issues. So I suspect that each side had at least 100 rounds per man. Now, if you're firing at the Army sanctioned or Army ordered rate of 3 rounds per minute, that's the drill standard, which is hard to achieve over a prolonged period of time. 3 rounds per minute, 90 rounds is 30 minutes. But you're going to be firing more along the lines of a round and a half or 2 rounds per minute for intense fire, and there might be moments where you're not firing. So I think an hour to an hour and a half is reasonable. I'm not sure exactly what the park thinks, but
yeah, it's really difficult to tell. Some of the Confederates talk about 2 hours.
yeah.
But that seems a long time when you then start trying to sequence other things both before and after it.
And if you, I have no primary personal experience in combat, but if you read enough accounts of combat over time, you begin to understand how the participants in a fight, the time becomes very subjective. 10 minutes can seem like an eternity, or it can, or an hour can seem like a minute.
And 2 guys that basically just